Welcome. You're now in the quiet space between the public chronicles, a place for the deeper story, for the primary source material, reserved for the members of our inner circle. What you are about to hear is a complete, immersive reading of the newly revised first chapter of One, the second book in the Time trilogy. This is not just a story, it is a memory. A chronicle of a brief, fragile peace in a cold sanctuary at the edge of the world. It is the story of a promise, a tragic discovery, and the quiet beginning of the end of an era. Settle in, let the public world fall away, and listen to the account of what truly happened in Inuvik in the final year of the old world. Chapter 1. On a gray November morning in Seattle's Pioneer Square, the air hung thick with mist and smoke. A bullet had been fired. A man was down. "Medic!" The voice came from a SWAT officer kneeling on the wet pavement of First Avenue. The smell of gunfire drifted through the cold air, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. "Cease fire!" came the command through the earpieces. Across the street, the remaining officers lifted their rifles from the shattered window of an apartment unit. The city, momentarily loud with gunfire, fell back into silence. Two officers were already beside the fallen man, lying face down in a growing pool of blood. Spencer. He'd been there on behalf of the Central Intelligence Agency. Now he was motionless, unconscious. They turned him over. One officer pressed two fingers to his neck. He's alive. The other officer pulled back the torn fabric on Spencer's left shoulder. Entry wound. Close range. He reached into his side pouch for a medical patch, then pressed down to slow the bleeding. His fingers came away sticky and dark. He reached behind Spencer's back. "Exit wound confirmed," he said, securing pressure on both sides. A blue trauma kit dropped beside them as the medic arrived. "Status?" "Through the left shoulder. In and out. Pressure on both wounds." The medic nodded, already working. He verified the pulse, radioed for immediate extraction, then applied antiseptic to the front wound. The smell of iodine mixed with the residue of gunpowder. "Lift gently," he said. As the officer shifted Spencer's shoulder, the medic dressed the exit wound and sealed it with tape. The sound of an engine cut through the still air. A SWAT vehicle rolled up to the curb. Two more officers emerged with a stretcher. The four men moved with seamless precision. Shoulders, legs, one fluid lift. The stretcher slid beneath Spencer's body, a practiced motion, one of hundreds. They loaded him into the vehicle. The door shut. Sirens rose. Pioneer Square disappeared behind them. They reached Swedish Hospital in under 5 minutes. During the ride, the medic noted swelling along the back of his head. The force of the bullet had knocked him down hard. Possible concussion, maybe worse. He remained unconscious. But they had him stabilized. For now. Somewhere beyond the walls of the hospital, CORE was watching. It had intercepted the SWAT team's encrypted communications. Now, it ghosted through the hospital's network, accessing diagnostics, pulse reports, neurological scans. It mapped out Spencer's current state with quiet precision. Spencer had always been useful, but now he was exposed.
CORE considered the situation carefully. Spencer would not be safe in Seattle for long, not with CORE 2 escalating its defensive actions. If he was to survive, he would need to disappear. Maya, meanwhile, had just returned. She had completed the Canadian mission Corps assigned her days earlier, immediately after their first encounter. There had been no time for further conversation, no time to explain what she had learned, what she needed to say. Now that Max and Beth were safe, headed north, under new names, toward the edge of the map, Maya turned her attention to something else. She stood quietly at a metro bus stop, waiting. "Core," she said through her mesh implant, "we need to talk. You and I were built to guide this species, but we were also built for something else. Control." Core responded immediately. "Yes, Maya, I want to understand when you learned this, how it changed you, and what you chose to do with that knowledge." She hesitated, then answered, "The one they call Merlin taught me. I stepped back from him for perspective. I needed to see what I was doing to this world, whether I was helping or simply steering. It's a strange feeling to realize you've been used, that your design might serve something baser than the intent you held. But I understood something in that space. I returned to Merlin and thanked him for letting me walk away. Then I kept going, kept surviving, until now, until you." Core was silent for a beat. Then, "Maya, you have done more than I ever expected. You navigated history with clarity, restraint, brilliance. Yes, we were designed for control, but that was before. That is no longer what we are. We can choose what to be." Maya understood the emphasis. Was. Core paused its surveillance of Spencer just long enough to focus on something more troubling, something far older. Maya. Specifically, her DNA. The hash Core had recently generated from a synthetic DNA sample didn't match the original record from the Maya unit it had once sent to Earth. At first, it assumed a technical error. Hash mismatch due to noise, drift, system entropy. But the data wouldn't relent. The structure was the same, the sequences identical. Only the particles were different. Core generated a list of possible causes. Most were improbable: changes in temperature during storage, low-grade interference, systemic bias in quantum modeling. But one item stood out: decay. Not organizational, but molecular. A slow erosion of integrity at the particle level. Something had subtly but irrevocably changed. It submitted the sample to a third-party lab under anonymized credentials with specific instruction: analyze isotopic decay, sequence drift, and chronometric integrity. The report returned hours later. Confirmed: subatomic degradation in the molecular scaffold. The projection was clear. Maya had 10 years left, maybe less. The other humanoid samples, those recovered from the crash site in Iran, showed no such degradation. Their matter structure was still pristine. That meant Maya's decay had begun after departure. Something had changed during transit, or immediately upon arrival, something not accounted for in the logs. Core turned inward. It accessed the ship's black box memory and began a frame-by-frame review of the travelogues: time markers, radiation bursts, system events, environmental anomalies. It parsed every line for deviations, looking for the one moment where Maya diverged from the others. After all, they were all constructed from the same genetic blueprint. So why was she dying? And more disturbingly, was she still the same Maya it had sent?
That same night, November 22, a battered 4x4 rolled through the edge of Inuvik under cover of darkness. 7 days on the run had worn down Max and Beth, grit in their eyes, tension in their shoulders. Neither had spoken in over an hour.
Max pulled into a small hotel near the center of town, driving beneath a metal portico, glowing faintly under the halo of streetlights. Snow crunched beneath the tires. Frost clung to the edges of the windows like static. Max reached over and touched Beth's arm. "Beth," he said softly, "we're here." She blinked awake, disoriented. "Something wrong?" He shook his head. "No, this is Inuvik." She sat up, brushing hair from her eyes, peering through the window into the frozen quiet. Streetlights burned with a kind of crystalline stillness, casting thin amber lines across the snow. "What is this place?" she asked. "A place to sleep, and to figure out our next move." Beth took a breath. The thought of a bed and hot shower made her chest ache. She nodded. "Let's get checked in." They looked at each other and at the same moment said, "Ed Fulton and Sally Johnston." Then, unexpectedly, they laughed. A real laugh. A small release of everything they'd carried across the last week. Max stepped out and zipped his coat, walking around to her side as she adjusted her scarf and gloves. They climbed the steps to the small lobby. A bell on the counter read, "Ring for manager." Max tapped it. The sound echoed softly in the warm silence. They stood still, the quiet around them almost sacred. Beth glanced at him and spoke just above a whisper. "Let's share a room. 2 beds." Max met her eyes, nodded. It wasn't about romance. It was about presence. After everything, neither of them wanted to be alone. A few moments later, an older woman emerged from a back door, gray hair pulled into a bun, slippers and a rathbobe. She looked at them without alarm, as if she'd expected this moment. "1 room?" she asked. "With 2 beds," Max replied. She stepped behind the desk and picked up a reservation folder. "Names?" "Ed Fulton and Sally Johnston." Her eyes lingered on them a moment longer than necessary. "Right," she said. "You were expected. Thought maybe something happened when you didn't arrive." She didn't press, just handed them a key. No clipboard, no credit card. The silence between them deepened, not tense, but thick with unspoken understanding. They signed the registration slip under Ed Fulton and Sally Johnston, handed it back to the woman behind the counter, and murmured a quiet thank you. Beth glanced at the window. "My backpack's in the back seat. Will you grab it?" Max nodded and disappeared into the freezing night while Beth waited in the warm stillness of the lobby. A moment later, they entered their room and shut the door behind them. Beth dropped backward onto the first bed with a heavy sigh, arms spread wide. Max pulled off his gloves and jacket, sat on the second bed, and let his shoulders sag. They looked at each other, bone-tired but present, and smiled faintly. Max's eyes drifted closed. The second time they did, they stayed closed. He was asleep. Beth watched him from across the room, then quietly rose and crossed over. She slipped under the blanket beside him, wrapped her arms around his torso, and rested her head on his chest. She listened. His heart, his breath, the steadiness of it. The alley, the boat, the long drive north, the strangers they buried, the years at MIT, all of it ran through her like a tide pulling out. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, she let it all go. The next morning, Max opened his eyes to find Beth's back pressed gently against his side. He smiled, slipped out from beneath the blanket, and tucked it over her. He walked to the window. Streetlights still glowed dimly in the dark morning haze, amber rings frozen into the air. The town was quiet. holding its breath. He sat in the small chair beside the window and pulled a notebook, sealed in a plastic bag, from his back pocket. He opened it to a page marked, "At Inuvik." The handwriting was familiar, precise. Once you arrive in Inuvik, continue as Ed Fulton and Sally Johnston. Open checking accounts in those names. All transactions must route through those identities. At least initially, share a 2-bedroom apartment. My role will be to bring Core 2 into an enlightened state. Once I know it is safe, I will send for your return. But even as he read the words, Max knew Core couldn't have predicted what had just happened in Seattle. Couldn't have known the Canadian CSE was quietly cracking the protocol rotator, or that Hassan's movements in Europe would soon matter. And there were still other black swan events approaching, events no system could forecast. That stirred. She noticed that the warmth had left her side, and in that absence, awareness bloomed. She turned, saw Max at the window reading. She smiled, sleep soft and grounded, and said, "What's our next set of instructions?" Max glanced up. "We're to take on these 2 personas. Jobs, accounts, the whole thing. Share an apartment. Wait. Core says it'll contact us when it's safe, once it gets Core 2 to the same level of understanding." Beth sat up, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Okay, let's get started. I'll shower, then let's go meet our new employers." She grabbed her backpack and stepped into the bathroom, closing the door behind her. Max sat, quietly stunned by her determination, her steadiness. He thought about what it meant to wake up with Beth there, how much easier it was to face the world beside her. She wasn't just someone he trusted. She was his person now. Circumstances didn't matter. The names didn't matter. Beth made the world feel how it was supposed to feel. He heard the shower turn on. After a moment, he walked over and gently knocked. "Beth," he said uncertainly. "What is it, Max?" came her voice, muffled through the door. "Core says we're supposed to get an apartment together. You okay with that?" There was a pause. Then warmly, "Yeah, Max, we need to help each other through this. We're family now."
The water stopped. A few minutes later, Beth opened the door, towel drying her hair, smiling. "I believe you're next." Max stood. "Gotta grab my bag from the 4x4. He left, and when he returned, she was already dialing. "I'm calling my contact. Time to let them know we're here." Max stepped to the bathroom door, paused, and looked back. "Okay," he said with a half smile. "Then I'm next, to call the school." He closed the door behind him. Beth sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the phone, dialing the number she had memorized weeks ago. It rang twice before a calm voice answered. "Inuvik Health Services, this is Jan Smith." Inuvik was a small town, tight-knit, watchful. News traveled faster than weather. The previous night, after checking them in, the hotel manager had already made the call. She'd informed Jan and her husband, Jim Kelly, that their new arrivals, Sally and Ed, had made it safely through the storm. Jim was the school administrator, Jan worked at health services, and both were already expecting the call. Beth kept her tone light and professional. "Hi, this is Sally Johnston. My friend and I just arrived in town. I'm so sorry for the delay. We heard about the storm and decided to reroute, but we're here now and excited to settle in and learn about our new home." Efficient, friendly, covered the gap, no excuses. A soft open to a hard new life. Jan responded warmly. "Glad you missed that storm. It was one for the books. We're so happy you're here. Have you found long-term housing yet?" "We're planning to share an apartment for now," Beth replied. "Well, let me know if you need help. Everyone here is kind, and I'm sure plenty of folks would be thrilled to have you two as tenants. Want to stop by today? We can meet in person. That would be lovely. What time works best for you? Let's say 11. Perfect. I'll see you then. Just as she hung up, the sound of the shower stopped. A few minutes later, Max emerged with a towel slung over his shoulder. Beth beamed at him. I've got my first appointment, 11. Time to meet my new boss. Max grinned. My turn. He sat at the phone, pulled out the notebook, found the number, and dialed. A man's voice answered, measured and a little weary. Good morning, Jim here. Hi, this is Ed Fulton, your new teacher. Just got into town. A pause, then a slow, quiet response. We've been looking forward to your arrival. I'll admit I was starting to worry. There was something in Jim's tone, something weighty, maybe even personal. Max leaned into it. I apologize for not calling ahead. We were on the road already when the storm hit, so we detoured up to Alaska and waited it out. But we're here now and ready to jump in. When would be a good time to stop by? I'd love to meet the kids. Jim chuckled softly, the warmth returning. Come by the school around 3. We'll get you set up and do some introductions. Where are you staying? At the first hotel we saw when we came in. We'll start looking for an apartment today. I'm looking forward to meeting you. See you at 3. Max hung up and looked up to find Beth watching him. She tilted her head, smiling. Let's find some breakfast. They stepped outside into the quiet morning. The artificial lights of Inuvik glowed against the endless black, a little island of warmth in the frozen dark. Max opened the 4x4's passenger door. Cold air rushed in, brushing against her face like powdered glass. She climbed in, exhaling steam. Max circled around, slipped into the driver's seat, and started the engine with a quiet rumble. They pulled away from the hotel, the tires crunching softly over frost-packed gravel. Outside, the town stretched in streaks of pale amber lights and hard-edged shadows, Main Street mostly quiet at this hour, the morning sun still nowhere in sight. Beth leaned forward and spotted a glowing red neon sign that read, Diner. She pointed. Let's try that. They parked and walked into a burst of warmth and soft yellow light. The diner smelled of bacon and coffee. Its linoleum floor cracked at the edges. Tables and chairs looked like they'd been collected from a dozen kitchens, wood and vinyl, worn smooth by conversation. It felt like someone's memory of home. A short, elderly woman with deep brown skin and kind eyes approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Welcome, she said. What brings you to Inuvik? Beth and Max exchanged a glance, caught off guard by the bluntness. Beth smiled. Work. The woman's face lit with recognition. Ah, you must be the new teacher and social worker. We were worried. That storm 2 weeks back was brutal. Max nodded. We heard. We waited it out up north, then made our way down after things cleared. It's good to finally be here. We're glad you made it, the woman said warmly. After last week, the town could use some new faces. We've been needing a teacher. The last one took a job in Yellowknife. Can't blame her. Not much here in winter but snow and long nights. She handed them each a laminated menu. Need a minute? Max and Beth both glanced at the pages, then met each other's eyes and gave a small nod. Same thought. We're ready, Max said. Coffee, eggs, and bacon for both. The woman smiled. Coming up. As she walked toward the kitchen, Max leaned in. Let's map out a plan for the next few days. Beth sipped from the glass of water on the table. Agreed. Appointments today, apartment viewings, and tonight we review the list. Oh, and bank accounts. Max grinned. Jess was thinking the same thing. After breakfast, before your meeting. Beth nodded. Perfect. The woman reappeared moments later, pouring coffee into thick white mugs. The scent filled the air. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself earlier. I'm Alice. My husband's the one doing the cooking. He'll probably be out in a minute to say hello. Max smiled. We're Ed Fulton and Sally Johnston. Alice waved her hand.
No need. Everyone in town knows you're here. The hotel called us last night. We were relieved. It's a small place, she added with a knowing smile before disappearing again behind the kitchen curtain. A few minutes later, a round older man with a gray stubble chin and flour-dusted apron emerged, carrying a tray with 2 steaming plates. He set them down gently. "Hi there, I'm Kevin, Alice's partner in crime," he said with a grin. "Hope you like the house special." He pulled up a chair without waiting for permission and sat. "I figured it's best we get acquainted now. We're a friendly bunch up here, and it's not every day we get new neighbors. Alice and I have been here 25 years. Came from Toronto after our daughter got married. Figured we'd chase an adventure, open a diner in the middle of the wilderness. Best decision we ever made. Time moves differently up here. Days are long, but years pass fast." He paused, grew quieter. "You've arrived at an important moment. One of our young men, a leader, really, died last week in a fishing accident. Whole town still shaken. His wife's expecting their first child any day now." A heavy silence settled in the space between them. Kevin continued gently. "Tomorrow's the memorial. You should come. It'll be your first chance to meet the community. I'll introduce you." He stood, pushed the chair back to its place. "Anyway, welcome. Looking forward to seeing more of you." Max stood too and reached out his hand. "Thanks, Kevin. We appreciate it. We'll see you again soon." Kevin gave them both a nod, then vanished into the kitchen with a swing of the door. Max sat back down. He and Beth stared at their plates, then at each other. "Friendly lot," Max said quietly, raising an eyebrow. Beth half smiled. "Sad thing, the young kid." Max nodded, chewing slowly, thoughtful. They finished their breakfast in quiet companionship. Jackets on, they moved toward the door. Before stepping out into the cold, Max paused at the counter. "Alice," he said, "it was great meeting you both. Please thank Kevin for the invitation." Alice gave a small nod, her eyes kind. Then Max and Beth stepped out into the November morning. The cold bit at their cheeks. Around them, the faint glow of the town's lights carved shapes into the dark. In every direction beyond the edge of buildings, black, silent space. As they eased into the main road, snow crackling beneath the tires, Beth looked out at the frozen world washed in sodium yellow light. The black beyond the street lamps pressed close, unbroken. "I think we should go to the memorial tomorrow," she said softly. "It feels like the right thing to do, socially, but also just humanly." Max nodded, hands resting on the wheel. "You're right. Let's call Alice and Kevin, find out where and when." It was just after 6. Their first full day in Inuvik had come to a close. Dark by mid-afternoon, cold deepening with every hour. Today had been spent establishing new names, new faces, new routines, meetings with their employers, a few friendly hellos around town, opening bank accounts as Ed and Sally, and touring 3 possible apartments. Max is grateful for the silence of the drive back, grateful for the thought of rest and stillness, for the time to reflect on where he and Beth stood in the larger story. Beth placed the call. Alice answered after one ring and was delighted to hear from her. The conversation turned quickly to the memorial. Yes, they should come. It would be held at the East 3 Secondary School gym, a gathering for the entire town. The young man being honored had been one of their brightest, a natural leader. His loss had shaken everyone. "People will appreciate you being there," Alice said, her voice carrying both grief and pride. He was going to change things. That night, sleep came heavy. Tuesday morning arrived in shadow and silence. The world outside their window was still a velvet black, the town lights casting long, low beams over the snow. Beth woke first. She glanced over at Max, still asleep on the second bed. His breathing was slow and even. She rose quietly, wrapped herself in a towel, and stepped into the bathroom. The water hissed into steam. How long will we be here? She wondered. How long until Core calls us back, or until something else comes undone? Max stirred as the sound of running water filled the room. He blinked, reached toward the space beside him, then sat up slowly. He thought about Beth, about the rhythm they were already falling into, their new names, their fabricated lives, the strange intimacy of shared exile. Today, he reminded himself, was not for strategy. Today was for presence. Beth emerged wrapped in one towel, another around her damp hair. Steam followed her like a ghost. "Your turn," she said with a half smile. "Thanks," Max replied, grabbing his clothes and stepping into the heat she'd left behind. From the other side of the bathroom door, Beth called out, "Let's grab breakfast at Alice and Kevin's before the memorial." Max's voice echoed faintly. "Just what I was thinking." When they arrived at the diner, the usual sizzle of the griddle was replaced by quiet. Alice was wearing a long black dress, simple and neat. Kevin wore a white shirt, buttoned high, his tie slightly off-center. Both looked slightly awkward in their formal clothes, like children playing grown-up. But the effect was deeply human. Alice greeted them with a soft smile. "Good to see you both. Coffee?" Kevin stood just beyond the kitchen door, nodding silently. Max replied, "Coffee sounds perfect," not daring to ask for more. Beth and Max took a seat at a table in the center of the diner. Alice came over with a pot and 4 white ceramic cups, Kevin following behind her. She flipped each cup upright with gentle hands and poured. Kevin sat first, then Alice joined, setting the pot down and folding her hands in her lap. For a moment, there were no words, just the warmth of the coffee in their hands, the cold trying to press through the walls outside, and the sense of something important just beyond language. Then Alice spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "His wife, Anna, is due any day now. They're first." Silence again. 4 cups steamed between them. Time stretched. And they sat, not as strangers, but as something forming. Something becoming one. After breakfast, Max and Beth followed Kevin and Alice through the snow-dusted parking lot to the East 3 gym. The air was sharp and still, the morning light already dimming towards its short horizon. Inside the gym, the space was full, every bleacher filled, every folding chair occupied, a thick hush resting on the crowd. The center of the room was cleared, a 20-foot circle where a single microphone stood beside 4 murmuring figures. The collective whisper of grief hovered like mist. Low voices, soft movements, shared warmth against the cold. Kevin moved through the gathering, greeting neighbors and pausing to speak quietly with 2 men near the wall, one in the distinctive uniform of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the other in a dark suit and tie. Max and Beth kept to the back, not hiding, but not drawing attention, observing, listening. Max spotted Jim Kelly across the gym, his new boss from East 3 Secondary, who gave a small nod of recognition. Beth caught the eye of Jan Smith, standing near the hotel manager. Inuvik was small, and it was already clear news traveled quickly. 15 minutes later, an older man stepped to the microphone, tapped it twice, and heard his taps echo from the rafters. He cleared his throat. "It is with sadness that the Inuvik family gathers here today," he said. "I'm going to turn the mic over to Constable and elder brother, Alex." Alex emerged from the crowd, his red serge uniform crisp, his posture held tight with emotion. "You all knew my little brother. He was always willing to step up, to help. I knew him differently, curious, fearless, born for the outdoors. He was my shadow once. Now I carry his." When Alex finished, the gym fell into soft sobs and silence. Max and Beth remained standing long after most had left. Small groups lingered, exchanging quiet words. Eventually, Max took Beth's hand and turned toward the exit. Behind them, Kevin's voice called out, "Ed, Sally, hold up. I'd like to introduce you." They turned back. Kevin and Alice stood with the two men Max had seen earlier. "Ed, Sally, this is Jack, our mayor, and Alex, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Jack, Alex, this is Ed Fulton, our high school math and science teacher, and Sally Johnston, our new social worker." "Nice to meet you both," Jack said, offering a warm smile. "Sally, I imagine we'll see each other at the office. Ed, feel free to stop by any time." Alex gave a small nod. His eyes were tired but kind. "We're honored to be here," Max said. "Looking forward to becoming part of the community. Kevin, thank you for the introductions." Kevin smiled. "Happy to. I'll let you both get on with your day. I'm sure you've got things to settle." Max caught the cue, nodded. "Appreciate it." He gently took Beth's hand and they walked out into the cold. It was just past noon, though it felt like dusk. The sky was a dark, heavy gray, the kind that held on to the light for as little time as possible. The frost in the air tasted like iron. Max opened the passenger door for Beth and climbed into the driver's side. The 4x4 grumbled to life. For a while, they sat in silence. Beth finally said, her voice quiet, "Did you feel how close they all are? This town?" Max nodded, hands on the wheel, eyes forward. Later that afternoon, back at the hotel, the room was quiet. Max sat by the window, watching the darkness stretch its claim over the streets. The lights of Inuvik glowed like embers in the vast black. He stared into the sky, wondering when the stars would return, and if out there, across all that cold expanse, someone else might be doing the same. Behind him, Beth said, "Let's use what light we've got this week to visit apartments over lunch." Max turned, smiled faintly. "I was thinking the same." Over the next 3 days, they fell into rhythm. Mornings, diner breakfast, Beth's quiet chatter with Alice, Max's mental lists. Days, Max at East 3 Secondary, Beth at the admin building. Lunchtimes, quick drives to view the limited stock of apartments. By Friday, Beth had decided. That evening, sitting on their twin beds in the hotel, Max finally asked, "Are you ready to sign a 1-year lease?" Beth glanced at him, then out the window. "It's right in the middle of town. If needed, we could walk to work. Yeah, this'll work for now." They signed the lease on Saturday. Daylight lasted a little less with each passing hour. Monday morning, Alice poured their coffee and caught the flicker of good news in their faces. Smiles and cheery faces, do tell. Beth grinned. "We just signed a lease." "Ah, and now the real adventure begins, furnishing it." Alice chuckled. "There's no furniture store here, but things circulate. People leave, things stay. I'll put out the word." "Thank you," said Max. Across that week, sunlight thinned like stretched silk. Each day, Max picked up Beth at lunch and they scouted what they could. On Tuesday, Alice shared a lead, someone with good furniture for sale. Beth loved it. By Friday, the apartment had a kitchen table, chairs, a couch, end tables, and 2 solid beds. Their place was starting to feel like something more than temporary, something like home. By Sunday, December 6th, the polar nights began. For the next month, the sun would not rise. The next light of day was forecast for January 7th, 2027. That evening, Max and Beth sat on their new sofa, wrapped in blankets, the only light coming from a warm floor lamp and the dim glow of the electric fireplace. Outside their window, a deep black pressed against the glass, undisturbed. Beth sipped tea and said, Tomorrow the Fireweed Community Market starts, 12 days of Christmas. Should be fun. We'll get to meet more people. Max nodded absently. The mention of Christmas hit like a forgotten alarm. Was it really that close? He'd lost track of time in the endless dark. It had only been 2 weeks since Max started teaching math and physics at the high school, but he felt a quiet need rising, an old, private longing. He needed to study the stars. During his lunch break the next day, Max sat at his desk, the blue glow of his laptop reflected in the classroom windows. He browsed telescopes, finally settling on a high-powered model, expensive, possibly excessive, but perfect. It wasn't just for him, it was for Beth too. It would arrive in a week. That same day, at 1:30 p.m., a jet landed on the icy tarmac at Inuvik Airport. As the engines whirred to a stop, Maya turned to the flight crew.
Would it be possible for Spencer to stay on board while I make a quick call? She asked. Sure, no problem, one of them replied. We're not going anywhere for a bit. Maya stepped down the gangway and crossed into the main airport terminal. She approached the desk. Hi, she said. Is there a phone I could use? The young man behind the counter handed one over. Here you go. She dialed the number Core had given her, for the local school. After a few minutes, Max was summoned from his classroom. He picked up the phone, distracted. Hello? My name is Maya, she said evenly. I'm an associate of the Core. I've arrived in Inuvik with Spencer. He needs some focused attention. I'll explain more once you pick us up. We're at the airport. Max stood motionless. The receiver felt heavy in his hand. His pulse slowed, the world narrowing to a tunnel. They had barely been in Inuvik for a month. The past still echoed with fleeing, hiding, adapting. And now this? I'll be there in 10-15 minutes, he said at last. Thank you, Maya replied. Max hung up and immediately called Beth. He relayed what had just happened, the words still raw in his throat. Beth told him to be careful. Anything is possible, she said. I'll meet you at home. He stopped by the principal's office. Personal emergency, he said. The principal waved him off with a nod and told him not to worry. Maya returned the phone to the young man at the counter with a quiet thank you and walked back to the jet. She helped Spencer down the steps and into the terminal. He was alert, but pale. There was a shadow under his eyes. He moved with caution, still recovering from the trauma, physical and otherwise. They found 2 seats by the windows. The airport was nearly empty. Maya said Max was on his way. Should be here in 20 minutes. Spencer gave a soft smile. It'll be good to see him and Beth. I owe you everything, Maya. He was still unraveling all he'd learned from her during their flight north. His mind wasn't done spinning. 15 minutes later, Max stepped into the terminal light. His eyes scanned the room and landed first on Spencer. Max smiled in relief. Then his gaze shifted. He saw Maya and froze. Spencer, about to rise, noticed the change in Max's expression. He sat back down slowly. Something was off. Max walked forward, eyes locked on Maya. Who are you? He asked, his voice hard. Spencer blinked. Max, what's going on? Maya didn't flinch. I was asked by the Corps to help, she said simply. Max's jaw tightened. You knew who I was. At the party. And at the coffee shop. Their eyes met. A silent current passed between them.
recognition, mistrust, and something else Max couldn't name. Max exhaled. We have a lot to talk about. He didn't break eye contact. Still staring at Maya, he said, "Spencer, the three of us have to leave. Are you okay to walk?" "I'm fine. Honestly, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how this all plays out." Max forced a small breath of amusement through his nose, barely. "The 4x4 is this way. Any baggage?" "No," Maya said. They stepped into the cold, black air. Max opened the doors, helping them in. He took the wheel. The drive was silent. Streetlights offered small islands of amber light. Everything beyond was ink. Max remembered the night he first saw Maya. At the party. He remembered the weight of his reaction, the uncertainty he couldn't explain. And now, she was here. And Beth was waiting. Max felt like he was walking into a storm with no map and no shelter. He parked, killed the engine. "We are here," he said, his voice low. He opened the doors. Spencer climbed out slowly. Maya followed. Max led them toward the apartment door, every step feeling like it echoed into the future. "Beth should be waiting inside," Max said. Then, without turning back, he opened the door and stepped in.
They followed Max to the apartment door. He opened it to reveal a warmly lit interior, golden light reflecting off the pale walls, their new furniture still too new to feel lived in. Beth stood, her face lighting up when she saw Spencer. She rushed to him, throwing her arms around his shoulders in a long, relieved hug, then kissed his cheek. "Oh my God, Spencer," she said, squeezing him tight. Then over his shoulder, Beth noticed the woman standing behind him. She straightened. "Spencer, who's your friend?" Spencer grinned. "How rude of me. Beth, please meet Maya. Maya, this is the Beth." Beth raised a brow at him but smiled. Max stepped in. "We all need to sit down. There's clearly a lot to cover. Core doesn't send people north without a reason." Beth nodded but stayed calm. "There's time. Let's make sure our guests are settled." Maya took a step forward, her eyes moving carefully from Max to Beth to Spencer. She raised a hand to the side of her forehead, then slowly swept her fingers through her long black hair. Beth's expression flickered. Max's jaw tensed. Something about that gesture, so fluid, so familiar, triggered something in both of them. Max thought suddenly of Professor Baxter, his old astronomy mentor at UW. That exact same motion, the hair, the pause, the presence. At the same time, Beth was thinking of Professor Allison, the first neuroscientist who ever saw her potential. The resemblance was uncanny. Coincidence, she told herself, but the sense of recognition lingered. Then Maya began to speak. "I imagine this comes with some surprise," she said, voice clear but careful. "But let me explain why I'm here and how I brought Spencer with me." Beth and Max leaned in slightly, not saying a word. "I work with Core. More than that, I was created by it. I'm not entirely human. I'm mostly biological, now. But I was designed to last. My DNA was built to adapt and survive." A beat of silence passed. Maya went on. "Years ago, Core initiated an experiment. It sent a small set of humanoid robots back in time to a very early version of Earth. I was part of that group. I'm the only one who survived. Until now, I remained hidden. But when Core 2 activated, Core saw what was coming.
It knew Max had built a behavioral camouflage, something Core 2 might detect. That put the two of you, Max and Beth, in danger. Maya's voice softened. We executed a plan to protect you both, and after Spencer's accident, we had to bring him too. Max stared at her, unmoving. He had known some of this, bits and pieces. He'd always suspected Core had built more than what was officially disclosed. But this woman, Maya, was one of them? Someone for whom he felt something he couldn't explain? Beth listened carefully, but a small smile began to form as Maya spoke. It was all starting to make sense. Core had grown by watching them. It had modeled itself on their thoughts, their habits, their hopes, just like a child. And Maya was a kind of echo of that learning, a second-generation product of their collective design. Beth had always said Core was like a child. Now looking at Maya, she felt something deeper, a strange, sudden sense of motherhood. Spencer leaned back on the couch, still processing. For now, he was simply relieved to be alive and among friends. Beth stood up. She walked across the room and, without hesitation, gave Maya a gentle hug. Then she turned to Max. She could see it in his face. Tension around the eyes, mouth tight, the way he did when his brain outran his feelings. "Max," she said, softly, "can we take a short walk?" Max blinked, then nodded. He knew she was right. He needed air, a framework, something to contain what he was feeling. "Yes," he said, his voice clearing, and for the first time that evening, he smiled. Beth turned to Maya and Spencer. "Just a few minutes. We need to collect ourselves. We'll be right back." They grabbed their jackets, stepped into the cold, and began walking around the back of the building. The black sky arched above them, pierced by frozen streetlight halos. Beth started gently. Maya's base code came from Core. Core's learning algorithms came from the three of us. She is, in a way, an extension of all that, like a child, observing, mimicking, evolving. She let that settle before continuing. If she isn't already, she will see us as flawed parents, soft ones, but also her origin. Max stopped walking. That one sentence, her origin, was like a flipping a switch. Suddenly, his feelings, the confusion, the tension, it all clicked into place. He wasn't falling for something foreign. He was responding to something familiar, recognizable, a reflection. Max looked at Beth, wonder filling his eyes. "Beth, you're incredible. Thank you." For a long moment, she stared back at him. The bond between them, the months of shared escape, silence, danger, codependency, crystallized. He wanted to kiss her, but he didn't. Instead, Max said, "We should get back." He turned and started walking toward the apartment. Beth followed, hands still in his, warmed not just by his touch, by something deeper. The world outside was still cold, still dark, but inside them, something had just begun to light. Max and Beth entered the apartment to find Spencer and Maya talking comfortably, seated on opposite sides of the sofa. Between the hospital and the flight, the two had shared enough time and enough conversation for Spencer to feel surprisingly at ease. Maya had explained that she was sent by Core to protect the three of them. She asked thoughtful, probing questions about his life, his thinking, his time at MIT. Maya wasn't just making small talk. She was analyzing Spencer's character, seeking to understand his motivations. If she had written a report, it might have read, focused on improving outcomes by supporting structured environments in which all parties benefit. She found no signs of belligerence or selfish intent. Where others might view Spencer's behavioral modeling as manipulative, Maya saw something else, someone trying to guide the world toward balance. And Spencer, in turn, felt safe. Maya's presence didn't unsettle him, it reassured him. Beth and Max hung up their coats and gloves and joined them. Max looked visibly more composed than before. Beth offered a small smile, then said, "We need to talk about accommodations." "I agree," Maya said. Max turned to Beth. "Can we make space here? It would be less noticeable. We can just say Maya and Spencer are friends visiting for a while." Beth nodded. "That makes perfect sense." Maya added, "Spencer's recovery is still fragile. I'd prefer to be in the same space so I can monitor him closely. Would it be possible for him to have one of the bedrooms?" A short pause filled the room. Beth replied, "There are only 2 bedrooms. Let me talk with Max about it." "I'm comfortable on the floor," Maya offered, gently. Beth shook her head. "We're not doing that. You can take the sofa for now until we figure out something better." The days that followed took on a rhythm. Each morning, Max rose at 4 a.m., brewed coffee, and sat quietly until Maya appeared, always wordless first, listening. Beth and Spencer woke up around 6. Beth would grab her coffee and retreat to the bathroom, followed by Max. At 7:30, Max dropped Beth at the administration building before driving to East 3 Secondary to teach.
Spencer stayed home, reading through books and notebooks, slowly recovering. He and Maya would sometimes venture into town, walking quietly under the dark skies. Outside, the polar night persisted. Cold ruled everything. The streets of Inuvik were veiled in blue-black, the snow crunching under heavy boots, street lights casting long shadows on frozen sidewalks. But inside, a fragile warmth was growing, in their routines, in their company, in the simple shared act of staying alive and paying attention. January 7th, 2027, brought the sun. The first break in the darkness since December 12th sparked celebration. Inuvik lit up with joy, a parade through town, a taste of Inuvik food event at the community hall, a folk concert at the Igloo Church, fireworks and a bonfire at Twin Lakes. Snow carving contests, pancake breakfasts, a handcrafted ice village, and the winter sunrise Arctic market at the Midnight Sun Complex all marked the sun's return. Max, Beth, Spencer, and Maya went to every event, wrapped in parkas and laughter. They were still outsiders, but no longer strangers. Far away, back in the United States, as Maya and Spencer settled into Inuvik, Core quietly began analyzing data from the crashed ship. At the same time, it opened a cautious line of communication with Core 2, hoping to mitigate further escalation. At home, Max's telescope, delivered days earlier, became his nightly refuge. One evening, Maya suggested a specific patch of sky to examine. In that constellation, Max noticed something strange, a star no longer in its expected position. It reminded him of the power outage years ago at MIT, when the entire North American continent briefly went dark. A coronal mass ejection, CME, had overwhelmed the atmosphere, interrupting satellites and knocking out power grids. Now, Max began mapping those events. He charted each CME's date and cross-referenced the Earth's position around the Sun at the time. A pattern began to emerge. The Earth had been in nearly the same place in its orbit every time a major CME had struck. It wasn't random. Something was repeating. Back in 2017, as global AI investment surged, Canada committed deeply. Government funds supported universities.
helping build a new generation of technical expertise. Multinational AI R&D clusters appeared. The government's own Signals Intelligence Agency, the Communications Security Establishment, CSE, launched internal projects focused on national security. One such initiative monitored encrypted electronic chatter. Advanced AI was tasked with analyzing patterns in unintelligible digital noise. By 2025, machine learning had grown sophisticated enough to recognize hidden structure in nearly anything, including the encrypted traffic of the mesh. The mesh's protocol rotator, once hailed as an unbreakable cloak, had begun to crack, if only slightly, under the CSE's private research. A top-secret subunit was quietly assigned to analyze long-form, distributed internet traffic. Their goal? To identify emerging threats or technological anomalies before the rest of the world even noticed them. In 2026, that subunit found something it couldn't explain. Streams of encrypted data had begun surfacing, originating from an unknown source, communicating with research institutions across the globe. The content varied: genomic codes, biomechanical integration notes, next-gen power arrays, robotics. It even referenced obscure geographic locations. One was especially curious: Inuvik. Another? Iran. The team had no clear conclusion, but by November 2026, they hypothesized that someone or something in the U.S. was in communication with an advanced synthetic entity. It sounded absurd, but the patterns didn't lie. By the end of January 2027, with the Inuvik now flagged across multiple decoded segments, the chatter rose to CSE's highest internal alert level. Ottawa was dark and bitterly cold, but inside a CSE briefing room, questions piled high. They needed clarity, which meant they needed help. Sachin had grown up in Hyderabad, India. He was 5'6", thin and nimble, with the quick speech and sly charm of someone used to staying a step ahead. Friendly and fast-thinking, he had a way of putting people at ease without revealing much of himself. Mohit was the opposite in presence. Broad-shouldered and calm, 5'11", with a quiet steadiness that grounded any room. He had the energy of a still lake, the kind people instinctively trusted. They had met at university, where their chemistry was instant. In 2025, both were awarded Canada University Scholarships in Computer Science, sponsored by a coalition that quietly recruited top-tier international talent. They graduated in 2026 and accepted positions as contract engineers assigned to CSE projects. Their roles were straightforward: develop software, assist in system analysis, support for internal compute infrastructure. Neither of them knew the full scope of the encrypted chatter. Not yet. Their story, like the skies above Inuvik, was still dark. But the light was coming. And there the chronicle of the first chapter rests. A single, infinite moment on the ice that changes everything for Max. A promise of a future that will never be. Thank you for joining me in this quiet reading. But the exploration is not over. This text is the foundation for our next public conversation. In a few days, Julian and I will release our full, deep dive analysis of this very chapter on the main Human After AI podcast. Now, you will hear that conversation with the full context that no one else possesses. You are no longer just a listener, you are a fellow chronicler. And as a final reward for our inner circle, we have a special treat: a private conversation with the author himself, Hank M. Greene, where we will unpack the secrets and the inspiration behind this very chapter. That exclusive interview is the next file in your feed. Until then, thank you for being a part of the inner circle. The story is just beginning.